Uneasy Equilibrium book, and it's chapter 5, the history of the African People Socialist Party, is the basic text. It's the longest chapter in the book. It is a very long and even so incomplete chapter in the book, and it would take a tremendous length of time to try to go through the entire chapter. We won't do that. We will reference it, but I think that it's important for me to give you an indication of why it is that I wanted to do this discussion on the party. And in the guide that we work for, the title is Why We Need the African People Socialist Party. And it is extremely important during a period like now, that one that's exciting me. A lot of revolutionaries, not only in this country, but throughout the world. Many people, most of the people who are coming into the movement right now are coming to us without any political history, or very little, if any at all. Most of the people are coming to us as a consequence of having been radicalized of the brilliant, incredibly important rebellions that kicked off on August 9, 2014, after the police murder of 18-year-old Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Before that, it was very difficult to win participation in discussions about revolution, about changing our condition, and sometimes just about Black people at all. And we had, before that, the people who were considered themselves activists were often secured in the privacy of their own homes and dorms and places like that on social media. Or they were people who would view YouTube videos of people like Umar Johnson, or people who would engage in annual treks to the pyramids to look at the pyramids, and people who considered knowing something about Black history beyond George Washington carving peanut butter. These were people who were engaged in what was considered to be progressive or positive or consciousness, Black consciousness. We often heard the term being used. But most of the people who came into political life were not conscious of a revolutionary tradition, revolutionary trajectory, the history of our conditions, the history of the struggles that brought us to where it is we are today, and what the hell we ought to be trying to do about it. And that's no accident. The fact is that we do come from a revolutionary trajectory, and that is something that can only be expected. The fact is that Africans, certainly in the United States, are people who got to the United States, unlike most people who came looking for a better way of life. We got here as captives. We were not the immigrants that people like to talk about constituting the makeup of the U.S. population. We came here as captives, not as immigrants. And as captives, you have to, it should not be difficult to understand why majority of African people in the United States would have been engaged in struggle and resistance, and why the history and tradition of African people in this country would be one that's characterized by resistance and struggle. Another thing that I think should be understood is that Africans are in the United States because Africa itself came under assault and was attacked. So again, it's not a case of Africans having left Africa to come to the United States looking for a better way of life, but Africa, our Africa, the mother country, the place, the origin of all human life, and certainly the origin of Black people, the people who look phenotypically the same, Black skin and all of the other features that constitute Blackness, Africa came under assault, and Africa itself has been engaged in history of resistance going back immediately. In this immediate history, the history that gave rise to the circumstances we are confronted with now, Africa itself came under assault 600 years ago when Portugal, in July of 1415, initiated the capture and enslavement of African people. So there could not be anything other than a history of the kind of resistance that Africans have been engaged in for long periods of time. Of course, in the 1960s, we saw the height of revolutionary movement, not only of Africans in this country, but throughout the world, where the Chinese once talked about revolution being the main trend in the world. And in the 1960s, we saw a tremendous manifestation of that struggle in the United States as well. What happened, of course, is that some of the most significant revolutionary forces, people like Malcolm X, who I truly consider to be the immediate ideological guide, leader of the movement we're involved in today, the one who probably best represented the trajectory of Marcus Garvey. Malcolm X was assassinated. He was assassinated physically in terms of the brutal murder. Then he was assassinated in terms of his character, assassinated in terms of his political beliefs, and even up to now, we see an ongoing attack on Malcolm X. Martin Luther King was assassinated and murdered as well. The Black Panther Party, which came to be recognized reasonably so as the revolutionary center of African struggle in this country, was destroyed with several of its leaders assassinated as well. And one of the few remaining organizations, perhaps the only remaining organization up to this point, was the African People Socialist Party. And with the assassination of Malcolm X, we began to see the revolutionary trajectory begin to disappear with the assassination of Malcolm. Malcolm is killed, and you can't get to Malcolm X through what many people would consider the logical vehicle, and that would be Louis Farrakhan, who, when he was Louis X, had been Malcolm X's assistant minister. But the truth is that Farrakhan and Malcolm X don't represent anything alike. That Malcolm, if they had, then Farrakhan would not have left Malcolm. When Malcolm split, when the split happened within the Nation of Islam, essentially because of the revolutionary trajectory that was happening in the whole world within the African community. Remember, it wasn't the nation as a whole that brought us the lessons of the Vietnam Revolution. Rice eaters in Vietnam with only a blade who went up against the U.S. military. It wasn't the Nation of Islam as a whole that brought us the lessons of the Mau Mau and Uhuru. That was Malcolm X. It wasn't the Nation of Islam that talked about revolution. That was Malcolm X. And this began to represent a certain kind of diversion within that entity called the Nation of Islam, the one that Malcolm had done so much to build, the one that Malcolm put before millions of people around the world through the creation of Muhammad Speaks, a newspaper that represented the Nation of Islam. So Malcolm X was murdered, and Martin Luther King was murdered, and left in his place was Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and people like that. They were forces who were there. The Black Panther Party was destroyed, and there's this entity that's called the New Black Panther Party that bears no resemblance at all to the traditional original Black Panther Party, with the exception that sometimes they wear berets. But the Black Panther Party was a genuine revolutionary organization. It was a communist organization. And even though we may have had differences at a particular time, it was always a materialist organization that was really clear where it was that it was trying to go. And so what we've seen is the assassination of Malcolm, the assassination of King, the destruction of the Black Panther Party, the defeat of a revolutionary movement. And this is something that's caught many people flat-footed. The African People Socialist Party, which has a history, and we talk about this in the chapter that we're talking about that's the basis of this study today, and everybody should read it because we won't have an opportunity to go through that in any kind of comprehensive way in this discussion, but you should read it. It's really important. You should read it not just for this particular study, but because we have to create our own revolutionary intellectuals. The ruling class, white power, you're not going to get it out of the universities. In fact, there are people in this study today who do attend universities and things like that, and who complain mightily about how it's almost like a waste of time being at the universities because there's nothing that they can get there except a promise of admission into the new world of prestige and that is bestowed upon Negroes who become adequately de-Africanized. But what has happened is that this whole revolutionary history, revolutionary trajectory has disappeared. So now the African People Socialist Party, which has an origin going back to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, certainly through me, and through what we have brought, what my contributions to what is now the party, through SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Beyond that, in the 1960s, in 1968 or so, the creation of the junta of militant organizations, JOMO, the Burning Spear newspaper, and in 1972, the African People Socialist Party itself. We have a continuum that goes back to the revolutionary movement of the 1960s, and it has never stopped, has never ceased. And from that, we've seen development occur. And so we've not been confused. When Malcolm was killed, for us, the entire movement did not die. We were able to sum up the lessons from Malcolm X and move it forward. We were able to sum up the lessons from the mass movement that characterized the civil rights movement that Martin Luther King was such a feature of. And so we were not taken off a trajectory by people like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or anything like that. In fact, we understood better than most people the origin of the movement that gave rise to a Malcolm X, that gave rise to a Martin Luther King, the mass movement of African people in this country and around the world. And then, of course, the assassination of the murder of the Black Panther Party. In many ways, the Black Panther Party and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee that was under my leadership in the state of Florida when it was created, when we were organized, had many of the same characteristics of the Black Panther Party. And that was because, unlike the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which, the character is actually included in the name in terms of it being student-based organization, the group that was formed by me in 1966 in Florida was a working class based organization. It was a community-based working class organization. Wasn't a case of students and other activists coming from someplace else to organize masses of people who need to be defend ourselves against the aggressions against how was it characterized? A segregationist order. it was an organization of African working class, just as the Black Panther Party that emerged in Oakland would be like second generation African workers whose parents had come to Oakland to work and build the ships and other things like that for Kaiser and other corporations to be engaged. And now the members of the Black Panther Party was like the second generation of those forces. In Florida, where we were located, we had a similar situation in that Africans who were fleeing Georgia. In California, you had Africans fleeing Louisiana, Mississippi, sometimes Texas, going into California. This is where the Black Panther Party got consolidated. In Florida, we had Africans who were fleeing the sharecropping and horrors of Georgia, who came into Florida, which was slightly different, even though Florida is essentially an agriculturally based economy, certainly was for the longest period of time. In St. Petersburg, Florida, where the party was created, it was an instance of white power bringing Africans into the city to build a different kind of economy organized around tourism that would take care of white people. So you had the emergence of a sort of a working class and force, and those of us who created JOMO were like the second generation of Africans who were here, and we were the ones who had a greater class consciousness and organized as we're more conscious of our interests as working people, as folk who were oppressed because of workers, and in fact. The height of struggle that happened that gave significance and to SNCC and then the JOMO organized around workers, in this instance, sanitation workers. So you had this whole history of struggle and resistance by Black people, and it was born from the fact that historically Africans in this country, like around the world, entered into the era of what we call capitalism as enslaved or nearly enslaved or colonially enslaved people. And it's a history that has been characterized by resistance, not by university participation, not by being stockbrokers and bankers and politicians, but by resistance by just ordinary working people, the kind of working people who might be walking down the street in a community and gunned down by a police, as what happened with Mike Brown. So these were the essential forces, the kind of people who, like Fannie Lou Hamer, who was just a sharecropper who got involved with SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and probably was one of the most significant forces in that era known as the Civil Rights Movement that helped to bridge the gap between the Martin Luther King type of turn the other cheekism and the new militancy that was born out of the inadequacies and frustrations that were spawned by that movement. So there has been this long history there. And then, of course, there was in the 1960s, this whole counter-revolutionary movement. It was a movement that killed Malcolm X, that killed Patrice Lumumba in Congo, that overthrew Nkrumah in Ghana, that murdered and wounded and captured Che Guevara in Bolivia, in South America, that destroyed the Black Panther Party, that initiated a blistering repression against African people in this country, where murder and assassination became the order of the day, where a war without terms was unleashed against Black people in this country. And I think it's really important for us to understand that, because, as I mentioned, most of the people coming to political life today are people who have been influenced by the resistance that stems from from Ferguson on August 14th, on August 9th, 2014, but there has been a long history of struggle and resistance that preceded that. It was just invisible to a lot of people who were just born into the situation that we are confronted with right now. And I think is important. I went through all of this, and much of this can be found in the chapter that I'm talking about in terms of the history of the African People Socialist Party. But the problem is that as it has been said, that people get born into to circumstances that seem to have always been like that. And so since there was no revolutionary movement going on, when people on college campuses decided that they were going to take over this center or force this issue, or when people now in Chicago, where struggle is raging, began to demand that Rahm Emanuel, a partner of Barack Hussein Obama, as quiet as is kept, a partner in crime with Obama, or when in Minneapolis, people storming the gates there, people who've just come into political life, the only thing they have before them is this situation, and the fact that they grew up during a time where there was no resistance, and so they've concluded that the resistance has just begun, that this is just now happening, and that all we got to do perhaps is to fix this thing with the police, or to deal with this issue on the campus, and not necessarily have a good summation of the entire situation that we're confronted with. And as I mentioned, part of the reason for that is that so many of people who were Africans who were involved in the struggle and other revolutionary forces have been murdered and assassinated, and they have not been accessible to African people who are now coming into political life. An exception to that is the African People Socialist Party, because we have been here and we have been engaged in struggle for so many years, and we are a survivor of that whole era of terror that was waged against African people to take us out of political life. But not only are we a survivor, we cut our teeth as a party during that process. Much of our development has come through that process. So it's not, when I say we were survivors, I don't mean like people who might have been hiding underground or under the rocks or someplace who suddenly now emerged after having survived. I mean that one of the things that even impacted on the efficacy of the terror of the counterinsurgency was the
transfer. I am sorry, that's not a valid extension. Please try again.
So a point that I would make is that the party came into existence and grown and developed during this period. Can I get a sense of whether we lost everybody or anybody? Are you still there on this call, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, good. There's a sort of craziness just happened. So I just wanted to make sure that we were still on. So this is the era that gave rise to the party. And it has something to do with the significance and the content and the character of the African People Socialist Party itself. So we didn't disappear underground, even though there were periods where some of us had to become invisible. But sometimes, most times when we became invisible as organizers under other names who were creating, who were leading resistance around everything from housing struggles to what have you, because we created mass organizations and things like that to make it happen. My basic point here is that we were never wiped out. And as a consequence of the ongoing struggle, we were able to see and experience and participate in the continuum of the era of defeat and that occurred with our revolutionary movement up to now. So I just wanted to start off with that, and I think it's really important because I want to talk to you about the party, but you can't understand the significance of a party if you think that the only thing that we're supposed to be fighting around is body cameras on cops, or to try to get Rahm Emanuel to resign. Or if you think the only thing we're struggling for is to get some more space on a university campus, if you think that's the limit of the struggle, then you can't understand the significance of the party. And you can't understand, you will be misinformed about whether that's the limits of the struggle based on whether or not you have some sense of the history of resistance that African people have waged since our being attacked and brought into captivity. Again, there's never been a time where we have not struggled. And I think that's really important. I think it's also important for us to remember that our struggle did not start off as something to sit down on the toilet next to white people or to be integrated with white people, etc. Our struggle was to reclaim our right to be a self-determining, self-governing people with all of the capabilities and capacity that any free nation of people would have. And the thing that we have the advantage of is the African People Socialist Party. We didn't have the African People Socialist Party or the advantage of the history of resistance, the immediate history of resistance when the party was created. You got to remember, during the 1960s, when Stokely Carmichael, who was to become Kwame Ture, when Fred Hampton, when Huey P. Newton, other forces and myself were around, it wasn't like we had veterans of revolutionary struggle that we could go to for any kind of advice, or we can lean on for any kind of tradition. So, I was in my 20s when I was trying, to make this revolutionary movement. Huey was in his 20s when he was meeting with revolutionary leaders in China. Stokely was in his 20s when he met with Fidel and forces like that. We were all young people with no access to any kind of revolutionary organized tradition that we could lean on, veterans that we could turn to. And today it is so different, because many of us, including myself, came into political life through spontaneous kind of activity. And what I mean by spontaneous, it was not informed by any kind of revolutionary theory. It came into political life not because, hey, let's make a revolution. In fact, I was locked up in a jail cell when it dawned on me through the that revolution was the only way forward. I was locked up in a jail cell through some kind of political activity I have been engaged in that might be considered civil rights activity, as militant and as radical as it was. When it dawned on me, when it became clear to me that the only way forward was revolution. Revolution was the only way forward. Now we have a revolutionary party in the form of the African People Socialist Party, so the masses don't have to go through that same trajectory, don't have to go through a civil rights movement to find the revolution, don't have to go through this process of on-the-job training to find the revolution. The revolutionary organization is here for us. It is steeped in tradition. It is steeped in history and struggle. It has learned so much in terms of ideology, so much in terms of practice over the struggle of the last period. And that's one of the things that makes the existence of the African People Socialist Party so important, and our presence in this discussion and meeting that we're having today so important. So initially, I was attracted to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee as opposed to Southern Christian Leadership Conference held by Martin Luther King and NAACP. Even though I went to several NAACP meetings trying to find my way, early on, I had a meeting of the Nation of Islam because I was so influenced by Malcolm X in my apartment building, trying to find my way. I mean, so this was, like a part of my own development, but it would be learning of the inadequacies of most of these organizations, and especially after the assassination of Malcolm X, that it became clear that that I had to do something else. So let me just say that political parties, we felt like it wasn't good enough just to continue to protest. That protest in and of itself wasn't good enough, and that's what we're having today. Just a lot of protests, but to what end? And this was a question that we were all confronted with, and we were fortunate in that we had experienced a period where tremendous revolutionary movements had occurred. People in Vietnam, magnificent revolutionary struggles, and living in Florida, right a few miles away in Cuba, the Cuban Revolution, and throughout South America, the kinds of things that were unfolding there. And then, of course, we were just coming from that period in the 1950s where the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, or Mau Mau, had just shaken the British Empire in fighting against white power there. So that impacted on our consciousness and to some extent. But it became clear that we had to go beyond just protesting. I mean, you can protest, but what does that have to do with changing circumstances? And the thing that made SNCC so important to us was that SNCC took that step beyond the civil rights movement and raised the critical question of political power. And because that's what the Vietnamese were fighting for. You don't hear a single attempt, certainly once the revolutionary movement had achieved its distinct character of trying to integrate with white people, although something like that did happen in Vietnam too, early on, where the intellectuals in Vietnam thought the best way to be more like France and like the French, et cetera, et cetera. That happens under all colonial circumstances. But then you saw the Vietnamese initiate an incredible struggle for their own power, for control of their own lives. That's a dignified struggle. And they were led by this incredible man who was called Ho Chi Minh, who had declared that there's nothing more precious than freedom and independence, and waged an incredible movement and struggle that fought and defeated. By 1954, they had crushed France in Vietnam, the colonial power that had dominated Vietnam for 100 years, and forcing the U.S. to come in and try to rescue colonialism, rescue the enslavement of the Vietnamese people. And they fought. The Vietnamese fought the United States. Incredible movement there. This was an anti-colonial movement that they were involved in. Cuba had fought an anti-colonial movement, certainly against the neo-colonial regime that had been placed there. All around the world, this is what was characterizing struggle. Algeria, everywhere. And in this country, then SNCC, through the influence of Malcolm X, came to conclude that our struggle had to be against colonialism. It had to be for our own power, for self-determination, not to integrate with the master, not to integrate with the oppressor, not to integrate with the colonizer, but to recognize our relationship to the colonized as colonial people who were subjected to terror and all kinds of brutality. That the reason that we were catching hell in Alabama was because somebody else controlled our lives. And today we got Black people being killed in the streets of this country, killed in parks, children gunned down in parks, asleep in Detroit, or choked to death in the streets of New York. All over this country, this is what we are seeing. And guess what? It's because of the same reason we live under colonial domination. So the question is the same. The fact that they destroyed Malcolm, killed Malcolm, or destroyed the Black Panther Party did not change that reality. The question is the same. We are colonized. And as Huey P. Newton himself said in one of his last public political appearances, which happened at the Uhuru House in Oakland, California. He said, you may have destroyed the Black Panther Party, but you have the Uhuru House. You may have destroyed the Black Panther newspaper, but you have the Burning Spear. So they haven't done anything by destroying one organization. And so our party is actually a continuation of the revolutionary struggle. So let me just say that we felt like the political party is really the highest, most efficient method that can be used by people to first win and then to actually use political power, to wield political power. We have to take political power. So we're not just talking about demonstrating anymore. We're not just talking about protesting anymore. The struggle now is for the capture of political power and the ability to wield political power once it is captured. That's the basis for developing the African People Socialist Party. Now, political parties, all political parties, not just ours, but all political parties, are really instruments of class, of particular classes, social classes. All political class parties represent a particular class. And in most of the world, much of the world, the political parties that exist represent the classes of the capitalist or imperialist rulers. And the masses of oppressed people do not have, generally speaking, our own parties, revolutionary parties. So what we, and political parties are comprised of the advanced sectors of a society who come together for whatever reason. They have achieved greater clarity of their own interests as a group, and they are more prepared to step out to advance their own interests as a group, as a social force, as a class. That's all political parties. And what we see is that, given the United States as a clear example, or you could go to England, you could go to most of the capitalist countries, and you will find that the political parties there are parties of the ruling class. And I like to use the United States because the United States talks about being a society where there are no class, real class differentiations. They don't even talk about ruling class. They don't even talk about, actually, they don't even talk about upper classes. They don't even talk about working class. The working class has disappeared. And there's this thing that they call the middle class that all of the politicians have to appeal to. And that's because work and labor has been so besmirched. And I would use a term knowingly and consciously of its historical origin, denigrated. The laborer worker has been so denigrated that nobody wants to be one. And of course, the reason labor has been achieved such a low status in the consciousness of the people is because of slavery, is because of what happened to Africans, and because labor is connected in the brains of everybody with slavery. So even that so-called progressive like Karl Marx would refer to the white people who worked in the capitalist system as wage slaves. It has its origin in slavery. So nobody wants to be a worker. To be considered a worker is like being considered a nigger. And even black people didn't want to be considered workers. And going to school as a child, I remember how my elementary teachers would speak shamefully about African workers, you know, getting on the buses and got on their old smelly work clothes and things like that. Nobody wants to be a worker. And the greatest thing that Africans wanted to do was to get a job that took us out of those places that were associated with being laborers. And of course, when we say workers and laborers in the real world, what happens to African people has always been akin to slavery. It's never been a time, you know, white people haven't had to work in, you know, in the real sense since the advent of capitalist colonialist slavery. And so nobody wants to be a worker. And so people don't talk in this country even about the working class. It's the middle class, and they don't talk about the ruling class or upper class. They talk about these things like the 1% or something like this, or however, whatever the percent is, the highest, the people who earn the top 10, etc. There is no ruling class, there is no upper class, there is no working class. There is a middle class, and then there is this thing that they like to refer to as the working poor. And which means not like Negroes, because we don't work, we just collect welfare. You know what I'm saying? This is how, so the whole question of worker has been really besmirched and given a bad taste to everybody in the world. But the workers are the ones, of course, who produce all the value. You wouldn't have a thing to eat, a place to live, or anything to drive, or any products at all without the labor of working people or their resources that's been stolen from them. So anyway, what we have is that that all political parties represent particular classes, and I would like to ask people to mute until it's time for you to talk. Please mute until it's time for you to talk. Otherwise, we're getting feedback. Okay. So, and the thing about political parties is that, and I like, again, to use the United States as an example, that here, the most notorious and well-known political parties are the parties of the Republicans and the Democratic Party. Both of these wings of the bourgeoisie. And because they are the way the political power is shared in the United States and struggled for in the United States within the electoral process, people confuse the fact that the Democrats and Republican parties have restricted access to the electoral terrain to just these primary organizations, that what we really need is a third party. That's what we often hear. A third party could be something like what Ross Perot had back in the days when he struggled to become president. This is a big-eared guy, billionaire out of Texas, when he struggled. And then there are things like libertarian parties, there's green parties, there are all these other things that call themselves parties. And there's the people who cry serious and copious tears because the two Republican and Democratic parties don't give space to anybody else. So they think the problem really is there needs to be a third party. But the fact is, all the other parties that we're talking about represent some sector of the bourgeoisie as well, and that want to express their interests outside of the sphere of what is called the Democratic and Republican parties, for whatever reason that's the case. And but the fact is that all of them represents the bourgeoisie, the ruling classes. And in the United States, the way it works is that it's quite successful because there's a sector of the ruling class that again calls itself this advanced detachment. its representatives. These parties represent the whole class. They don't just represent the smart guys. They don't just represent the one who know what's going on, the ones who know what's going on in Afghanistan, or who've got a plan for what should occur in South America, or know the way out in Iraq. They don't just represent them. They represent idiots like Trump. They represent bedwetters. They represent dope addicts. They represent people who just fly all around and have sex orgies and do all this other stuff, but they got a lot of resources. They are born into a class, a social force. And this political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, they represent that class all the time. They represent every sector of that class all the time, unless an element or a sector of that class does something that challenges or undermines the authority and the security of the class or the social system as such, then all of them are represented. So the bedwetters, the jet setters, the dope addicts who are part of the bourgeoisie are represented by the Republican and Democratic parties all the time. And because the Republican Democrat, that's the advanced detachment of the bourgeoisie. It's not just the bourgeoisie, it's the advanced detachment. It's the ones who see the future, make the plans, etc., and they look out for the interests of the bourgeoisie all the time. So what we represent in the African People Socialist Party is the advanced detachment of the African working class and poor peasantry. It's advanced detachment. Doesn't mean that we are the same as the workers. We are its general staff. We are the ones that look out for the interests of the class, whether the class is suffering from demoralization, drug addiction, and the kind of stuff that's imposed on us as a class all the time by the bourgeoisie. When you look at what's happening in Chicago, with the so-called with the horizontal violence and so people killing each other, and the call to get the police and bring in the military to do something to crush them, that's a call to bring in and to crush the class, to crush the working class. We represent the working class, whether the working class is confused about its interests or not. You don't hear us talking about give up the guns of the class. We say, no, disarm the enemies of the class, disarm the police and what have you. Get them out of the lives of the mass of the people and arm the class with its understanding of what its real interests are, and then help to overturn this relationship it has with imperialist white power. That's the job of the party. That's what we do. And so that's what we've been working to take on for a very long time. And it's not just been some abstract discussions. We are not the study group that you go to learn who led or controlled what dynasty in Egypt. We are not the study group that you want to go to if you just want to learn that, if you only want to learn that there were black people in this part of the world and that part of the world, and you can tell by their hairstyles and stuff like that. All of that stuff is important, but it's not important to show us the way out. I don't know the principles of Nguzo Saba, and could care less. I don't care about that. And I think there's something problematic about any African at a time where African people are enslaved and looking for a cultural expression of what is to be done, that we would discover what to be done is to create a Black Christmas. I just think that it's extremely problematic. That's got nothing to do with changing our conditions in the world. And the party, the advocate of the interests of the working class, we are looking for solutions to get out of this situation of oppression and murder that we suffer all across the planet. The fact that our planet, our continent, our country was stolen from us and divided, in white people, white power, and everybody who wants to now lives off black people, and we are suffering everywhere. That's the question. Give me a cultural expression that teaches me how to lock and load, that teaches me, you know, like how to organize mass of people to overturn this relationship. That's what the party of the African working class is looking for. How to bring science to this understanding. Because in many ways, you know, we have to recognize that spookism won't do it. That we have to, you know, defeat the nonsense that's been imposed on us as solutions to our struggles in the world. So political parties represent the advanced detachment. We are the advanced detachment. We are the vanguard. We are the general staff of the working class, of the revolutionary movement of the African working class, and we are clear. And we don't have problems with calling ourselves the party of the African working class. And this is something I want to clear up too, because I mentioned earlier how the whole notion of being workers has been so undermined by slavery, by the fact that African people were used as beasts of burden and animals and what have you, and that has now become what defines what it is to be a worker. And so we hate it. We hate it because we hate what's happened to us. But that to be captured and live in captivity the way we've lived in captivity. And by the way, what has happened to African people as forced laborers for several centuries has colored what it means to be a worker in reality in the world. Everybody who now works on a job is impacted by the tradition that was created through enslaved labor of African people, because the insanity of getting up in the morning before the sun comes out and then leaving and going to labor and then coming back in the evening after the sun goes down, that's crazy. Nobody logically would do that from free will. Nobody would rob themselves of every aspect of life in a relationship with their children, with their communities, with their people, to go out and engage in what white power and imperialism has defined as production. It's a form of slavery that has been informed by the forced enslavement of African people, forced labor of African people. So we should not, however, be running from the concept of the working class, because the working class, if there is to be any honor, any honorable, any decent sector of the population, clearly it has to be that sector of the population that provides the food, clothing, and shelter for everybody else. I mean, that's just sensible. Everything that we know, every doctor, every teacher, every professor, every banker, every experience that anybody else has, they have it as a consequence of there being a group of people in the society who get together socially and produce everything that's necessary for us to live. Every lesson that's learned, everything that we know about doctoring and science, etc., comes as a consequence of the process of producing and reproducing life, of going out and building and making things and creating what we need to exist. That's what everybody studies. So we should not run from that concept of the working class. It is the class that has to be liberated. And if you look at the essence of the working class, then the African nation is a proletarian nation. It is a nation of workers. And it is a nation of workers through tradition. And it is a nation of workers, obviously, through what has been imposed on us through colonial slavery in this era. So we don't run from the notion of being representative of the working class, representative of the class that produces all the value, representative of the class that makes it possible for people to live in houses and drive cars and to eat food. We don't run from identification with that class. If we run from identification with any classes, all the parasites who live at the expense of the workers, all the parasites who feed off the workers. And that's what we would run from. So we are part of the African working class. And we recognize that a fundamental contradiction did occur in human society through imperialism. When I say imperialism, I don't mean what the Marxists and Lenin defined as imperialism. As Lenin defined imperialism as being the highest stage of capitalism. We say capitalism is the highest stage of imperialism. That empire, it was the white empire, white people who left a starving, decaying, decrepit, hostile, unfree Europe and struck out and captured African people and captured the lands of other lands and other peoples and resources, etc., and began to build themselves at our expenses. That this was the empire. And through this process, we see the Europe consolidated. Was no Europe. Europe got consolidated through this process. The identity of white people was achieved through this process. The identity of the European was achieved through this process of slavery and brigandage. This is what helped to define white people as a group, Europeans as a group distinctly different from the rest of the people on the planet Earth. This thing, and this is what created what we know as capitalism. It was the empire. It was the extension of white rule, white domination over the rest of the world that brought in tremendous amounts of resources and productive capacity to Europe. It was the theft of thousands and thousands of acres of territory and land, of miles of properties and human beings. It was their annihilation and what have you that created this thing that we now call capitalism. And this is why we say that it wasn't capitalism that created imperialism. It was imperialism that created capitalism and white people and white power. That white people, white power owe their existence to the enslavement of African people, the theft of the resources of Africa and the rest of the people around the world. If you want to get rid of any of them, then get rid of this relationship and they will disappear. Please mute. They will disappear. So this is a struggle that we are quite conscious of, and that's why we say that we are the party of the African working class, and the African working class has to be unleashed. Because if you look at the real world, the very social force they taught us to hate has been taken out of action. That's why there are no paved streets in part in Africa. That's why there's no infrastructure in part. Because we've been paving streets for white people. All those people who are jumping on those rickety boats, trying to get to Italy and dying in the process, trying to get to Greece, they are building Europe. They will go there and build Europe. Germany wants the more than 1 million so-called immigrants that's coming from Syria. They want near white people coming from Syria because the white population is not reproducing itself. So we have ourselves in this place where we have been prejudiced against the workers when the workers, that's our only solution. We have to have access to the workers, to our own capacity to produce for ourselves. That's the struggle we're involved in. So I just wanted to say that. And also, to take this out of the abstract, our revolutionary movement was crushed in the 1960s. Malcolm X murdered. More than 30 members of the Black Panther Party murdered in 1968 alone, 1968, 69. More than 300 members of the Black Panther Party arrested. Massive military sweeps occurred throughout this country, arresting people whose names we don't even know, because everybody wasn't a member of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party was just more like a revolutionary center. It inspired African organizations and movements throughout this country. And just as what happened in Ferguson inspires a lot of people, everybody's out there doing stuff in similar ways. the Black Panther Party inspired people, and people threw up organizations, called themselves Panther organizations because they were so inspired by what happened. So our revolutionary movement was crushed. The co-founder of our party was murdered. I was in and out of prison for long periods of time, but we did not surrender. And the African People Socialist Party carried on the tradition, not just as a tradition, but we carried on a movement that represents the continuum of the resistance that African people have been involved in since we were first brought into captivity. We built the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement in 1985. 1985 in Oakland was called the People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. We built it because what became clear to us by now with the defeat of the revolution was that masses of people were demoralized. How can you bring people into political life when the last memory of into revolutionary life anyway, the last memory people had of the revolution was tanks in the streets and sometimes military forces marching lockstep, oppressing the communities and things like that. And the brutal assassinations, really exemplary murders of people like King and Malcolm and Bobby Hutton and members of the revolutionary movement just gunned down like Fred Hampton. So, you know, it was difficult to, and then the organizations themselves destroyed. And if not destroyed, the membership dispersed. Thousands of people who were locked up. We don't even know everybody who went to jail, in prison. We don't even know their names. People chased out of the country and what have you. So now we're talking about trying to finish the revolution or build a revolutionary movement. You got to start all over almost. And so that's what we built, a People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. In many ways, we recreated a civil rights movement, a militant civil rights movement, but this time a civil rights movement that was under the leadership of the revolution. So we're not starting absolutely new. We have a philosophy, we have a political line, we have tactics and strategies that we want to use to bring people first back into political life to do what? Complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. Not to get body cameras, but to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. That's who we are talking to today. When we're building this movement, asking people to come to our plenary that's going to be here January 9th, 10th, and 11th, we're not talking about coming because we're trying to find ways to get body cameras or to get Rahm Emanuel kicked out, even though we say kick him out. And we will be on the front lines trying to kick him out. Our objective is to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s. Our objective is to say that Lumumba did not die in vain. Malcolm did not die in vain. Fred Hampton did not die in vain. And they didn't die just trying to get body cameras or get Rahm Emanuel or get some nicer treatment by white power. We have to have the power. That's what the party is all about. And so we created the People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, 1985. It was really successful in helping to build an incredible movement in Oakland, California. You would have had to be there to see what I'm talking about. But we had scorched earth. I mean, revolution was everywhere in Oakland during that period of time. And by 1991, it became clear that we had to extend this movement beyond Oakland, and we went to Chicago in April 6, 1991. We had a conference to build the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and where its first president of the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement was Akur Njeri, who was the widow of Fred Hampton, who we brought back into political life, and her son, who we recognized as Fred Hampton Jr. We did. We recognized him as Fred Hampton Jr. Brought them into political life. And we went to Chicago because that's where the last nail in the coffin of the Black Revolution was pounded with the assassination on December 4th, 1969 of Fred Hampton. But Fred had already said you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill a revolution. And Huey repeated the same statement when he said You might not have the Black Panther Party, but you got the Uhuru House, and you might not have the Black Panther newspaper, but you got the Burning Spear. So you haven't done anything but killing one organization. Same statement that Fred made. And so we went there, and we went there in September, in April the 6th. We went there April 6th because that was the anniversary of the police murder of 17-year-old Bobby Hutton from the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. Because they believe in symbolism, and we believe in symbolism too. And so we also felt it necessary to show the continuum of one period of struggle to another period of struggle. So that's how we happened to get there. So we built NPDM, that became International People's Democratic Movement when we moved beyond the United States to other places. NPDM went to Sierra Leone in Africa, went to Canada, it went to England, it went to, I think finally into to Sweden, among other places. We built also the African National Prisons Organization, ANPO, which was a really important organization because you got to remember now scores and hundreds of Africans who were involved in the revolutionary movement are now stuffed in prisons. And also because the prison system is it's a tool, a colonial weapon that's been used against us historically. And so an incredible sect of the African working class are stuffed in rotting in these concentration camps they call prisons. So we built the African National Prison Organization. We built in 1982, we built the African National Reparations Organization with the intent, among other things, to make reparations a household word in the United States. And we succeeded in doing that. Everything that you see out in the world today that represents itself talking about reparations has its genesis, its immediate genesis in the work done by the African People Socialist Party. We gave rise and significance to many of the people who now are leaders of that movement. We built the African People Solidarity Committee because they just can't go around just saying the white people is the devil. You know, down with the white people, look at my melanin. There's a practical political question that we're confronted with. White people do exist in the world. So we're just gonna say down with white people, or they ain't got no melanin, and therefore, you know, black is beautiful. That's not good enough. What kind of program do you have to deal with that question? You know, how do you take into consideration for any strategy for liberation the existence of white people, the role that white people play in the world? How do you just simply continue to take white people as one monolithic group that cannot be penetrated? Are there no contradictions that exist between white people? Well, you know that's not true. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 17 different candidates running for a nomination of the Republican Party presidential thing, and more than 5 so-called Democrats, and all the other kinds of organs. There are differences and there are contradictions that exist between them that any meaningful, serious revolutionary movement organization has to consider. There are differences that exist between Greece and Germany. There are differences that exist between Spain and Germany, and differences in the EU that's trying to fracture right before our very eyes. And you just want to act like all the white people are just white people. So we developed the African People Solidarity Committee, and we did it also because we understand what is the primary motive force in human society. And as quiet as it's kept, brothers and sisters, and I hope we're not fracturing any bubbles, but white people are people, and motivated by more or less the same forces that everybody else motivated by. And that is essentially to produce and reproduce life. That's what it is. And what has happened, of course, is that Europe, what we now call Europe white people, have affixed themselves onto the body of the rest of humanity as a means by which they will produce and reproduce their own lives. And as somebody who has a responsibility to produce, reproduce life, to lead a movement of African people, to give a revolutionary party that will seize the ability for Africans to produce and reproduce life for ourselves, then we have to get this parasite off our backs. And And we created the African Socialist International, this party. And we created the African Socialist International because it's clear to us that our conditions of existence in this country did not start on 5 so-called Black Belt South states. Didn't start like that. Our conditions did not begin there. Our history did not begin with slavery. It will not end with slavery. Our history and the history we have with imperialism did not begin in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, or any of those places. The history we have with imperialism began in Africa. And the assault on Africa is responsible for the conditions of Black people every place on the planet Earth. Even people who never saw Africa before. Even people who had left Africa centuries and perhaps thousands of years before the assault on Africa, the condition of Black people every place in the world is responsive to the attack on Africa. Whether you're in the Pacific region, someplace, whether you're in India, someplace right now at this very moment, whether you're in Australia at this moment, this time in history, the conditions of Black people on the planet Earth are connected to the conditions of our people on the continent of Africa and our Africa. And that's what we have to deal with. So I'm calling on everybody to read Uneasy Equilibrium, and particularly right now, for this purpose, chapter 5, the history of the party. And part of what it is that we want folk to get out of here, as we want to thoroughly instill the fact that the African working class can never win the African Revolution and unite and liberate Africa without the party of the African working class. Without the party of the African working class. That, I don't care, the OAU, which was a trap that was imposed on us by white people and white power who wanted to frustrate Nkrumah's efforts to unite Africa into a single African state, can't do this for us. None of the Negro heads of state, people who call themselves Pan-Africanists and by other names, who looking to find a 6th region of the Pan-African, of the OAU, of now called the African Union, that is not the way forward. The OAU, the African Union itself, has to be destroyed, has to be overturned for the emancipation of African people. So we have to have the party of the African working class, and the party of the African working class has to be an international party, has to be grounded everywhere African people are located, and it has to be a party that is connected with the revolutionary aspirations and struggles of the peoples around the world. We need to help the party understand what is the Vanguard, what is the advanced detachment. It is something that, people reading this chapter, should become better acquainted with. Again, because we are not the working class, we are advanced detachment. We are people who are organized around principles of African internationalism and organizational principles of democratic centralism. We are professional revolutionaries. That's what we are. We're not just some ordinary African people, because ordinary force is not going to take us out of this situation. We are the African People Socialist Party. We are African internationalists. We want people to understand the responsibility of every party cadre and the party itself to lead, because the party has to lead if the people are going to be free. Otherwise, people will be tied to spontaneity. And we recognize in the African People Socialist Party that it's going to take revolution to free us. And it's not just going to take a revolution in the United States or a revolution in this place or that. It's going to take a worldwide revolution. And the advanced detachment of this revolutionary process is the African People Socialist Party. And the fact is that we recognize for revolution to happen, like some people are really upset because they see what's happening in the world, wars everywhere. And some people actually go to the Bible and say it's the end of times. And it is the end of time, end of the time of white power domination of the rest of the world. But we say in order for there to be revolution, there has to be crisis. And that's what is watching this crisis is very clear. Crisis abounds everywhere. We're talking about the murderous Chicago Police Department, the organization that once bragged that they were capable of committing the worst kinds of offenses against the people, and have committed the worst kinds of offenses. Now it's on the back foot. It's on the back foot because masses of people in Chicago, but not just in Chicago, because this is what must be understood. The reason Chicago stands out is because of what those young people did on August 9th, 2014, and what's been happening ever since throughout this country. The ruling class has to be unable to rule in the same old way in order for there to be revolution. And clearly the ruling class can't rule in the same old way, because if it could, Barack Hussein Obama would not be president. And the people have to demonstrate a willingness to fight regardless of the consequences. The people, in order for there to be revolution, people have to have concluded that that life and liberty are secondary to the struggle that we have with this enemy, and are willing to do anything to win. And there must be a revolutionary party that's guided by advanced revolutionary theory if you're going to have a revolution. And that's the thing that we're talking about now, to move beyond spontaneity, to take people to conclusion that revolution is necessary for African people to be free. And that's what this discussion is about. I think last week we had more than 300 people involved in this in the study. I don't know how many people there are here today, but the objective here is not just to be entertaining or something to that effect, but to help people recognize and understand the significance of revolution, to overturn this relationship. And if you're going to have revolution, you got to have a revolutionary vehicle through which this revolution is going to be implemented, and that's the African People Socialist Party. And you got to have people who are part of this organization, whose primary function, who recognize and understand themselves as professional revolutionaries. No matter whatever else they do, they are professional revolutionaries. People need to understand, and I think through the study that we're talking about, the responsibility of every party cadre, and the party itself has to lead everything. People have to be won to a profound love for this party, because the party represents the future of the free people. The African People Socialist Party was born in 1972 during the period of the U.S. government's attack on the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And we were formed because it was necessary to move beyond protests and a spontaneous mass movement, and organize to win and wield political power. People need to understand that our party represents a revolutionary continuum linking the African Revolution of the 1960s and its defeat with the present and the future. Our party was never a part of the defeat. We moved from one level of struggle to another higher level of struggle. The people need to understand that all political parties exist to serve the interests of a given class. The study will inform us that the African People Socialist Party is the party of the revolutionary class, the African working class, wherever it is located all over the world. And just in case some people have some reservations about recognizing the African working class as a revolutionary class, I want to emphasize that because people say, well, look at the working class. I mean, all the black people killing black people, etc. Who is that? Those are not professors. Those are not, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the difference. The African working class is the only group that has no material interest in the murder and oppression of black people. It's not to say that Africans don't do it, but the fact is that it's the bourgeoisie has a material interest in doing it. If the bourgeoisie kills us, you know that the bourgeoisie has done what it has an interest in doing. It's in its material interest to do it, to suppress us, to keep us colonized. If the Africans do it, and this is one of the reasons every African who is upset about the question is upset about violence among us, is because it's not in our material interest to do it. So we say, why would we be killing each other, right? It's not in our material interest. And when you recognize it's not in our material interest to do it, then you recognize that something else is involved in this thing other than us fighting for our material interest. When the African worker fights for our material interest, then what we do is fight for freedom and liberation. And the reason, the factors that contribute to us not fighting for our material interest is the fact that we do not have access to our own party. We do not have access to our own brains, because our own brains have been captured by the bourgeoisie or the African petty bourgeoisie, as opposed to African internationalism, which will help us to see the way. And African internationalism is a thing that unites with our objective interests, with what's in our head, with our subjective inclinations.
Could you please mute?
Please mute if you're not talking. I'm going to turn the floor over to everybody in a few minutes, but up until then, please mute. So the African People Socialist Party is committed to the interests and leadership of the African working class and African liberation, unification, and socialism. That's what I said, that we are committed to the interests and leadership of the African working class and African liberation, unification, and socialism. It's more than just unification. It's more than just the abstract concept of liberation, but socialism. And when we say socialism, I want to be clear on that too, because you have this organization, All African People's Revolutionary Party, that was founded by Kwame Ture, that talked about it being an organization fighting for socialism. It said that not fighting, but for socialism. And it said that what they described as Pan-Africanism is the unification of Africa, or something like that, of socialism. All African unity under socialism. But socialism is not just an appellation that you can simply wear. What is socialism? Socialism is the conquest of political power by the African working class. It is the African working class functioning as the state. It is the African working class that has control and ownership of the means of production. That's why people like you have in South Africa right now, Malema, who was the former head of the youth wing of the African National Congress, and that fell out with them, and now he calls for nationalization of resources, etc. And people confuse that with socialism because he's talking about nationalizing the resources. But even under the apartheid regime, there were certain sectors of the economy that were nationalized. That's not enough. The thing is, what class is in charge? What class is in control? To nationalize the resources under the bourgeoisie is still bourgeois control. To say that nationalize the mines, etc., what class is going to be in power? Socialism is the advent, is the emergence of the African working class to political power, to power. To the African working class now exists as the state. The state is the working class in arms. The African working class is a class that socially owns and controls the means of production. That's socialism. So we say African internationalism is the African working class political theory that informs our party's action and position. And once the party lays out the correct line, and this is, so let me just stay it right there. I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. So I know I talked a long time, and I know this study in the book is something like 80 some odd pages long. And what I did was I covered the essential content of that chapter, and I'm calling on you to read it. And I did a kind of an overview of the chapter with the assumption that many of the people who are involved in this discussion right now are people who are new to political ideas, new to political theory, new to political life, etc., and need some of the revolutionary history that informs what it is that the chapter and study is all about. So having said that, what I'd like to do now is open it up for some discussion. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, is it possible to get a quick roll call before you take the questions?
Okay.
Okay, if you haven't been in a roll call, in any of the roll calls, I'd like you to start now.
Mike Love.
Mike Love, okay.
Angela West.
Say that again.
Angela West.
Angela West, okay.
Uhuru's Brian.
Who? Brian.
It's Brian.
Brian. Okay, Brian, okay.
There's more information out there.
Okay, that's, people came through. So, start again. Please repeat.
Right.
Anybody else?
Chingy Nyong'o.
Okay.
Uhuru, this is Unique Divine. Opie.
Foots.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, comrade.
After 14.
Uhuru life. Uhuru life.
Got life.
Life, Akin. I got life, Akinia. I didn't get the person after Akinia. I think it was Janice or
Unique.
Janine. Okay, and then I have 4 feet. Anybody after that?
Oh, Will Lockett.
Will? Okay.
Did you or Angelica?
And Angelica?
Uhuru.
Okay.
Heard Jesse and Johan.
I've got you, Jesse, and Johan. You've been in a roll call.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
Uhuru, Jordan Geiger.
Charmaine Geiger.
Oh,
His mom.
so good to hear from you.
Uhuru, can you hear me?
Yes. Guinness.
Michael Everhart, Uhuru Furniture, Philadelphia.
What's your name?
Michael Everhart.
Michael. Okay. Everyone. Okay. That's it? Anybody else?
Uhuru, did you get me? This is Unique.
Unique? No, I didn't.
Unique. UNIQUE. Unique.
Till you.
Do we have, this is Unique Divine,
Yeah.
right? This is another
Yes,
Unique?
sir.
No, it's Unique Divine.
Yeah, this is me, the one and only. Uhuru.
Anybody after Unique?
There's 15 people watching on Uhuru on YouTube, and of the people, not everybody has identified themselves, but there's Viva Chazelle, Omali Yeshitela, James Grant, Raya Fogarty, Elizabeth. That's all who have identified themselves.
We had a max of like 20 that I saw on Periscope, and we're at 13 now. So.
Okay.
Well, this is
All
the
right.
numbers, yeah.
All right, comrades. So perhaps we can go ahead and.
I got a question. Can you explain why this won't work in the 6th region?
A question, why won't this work in the 6th region? He's saying.
Yeah, she's saying.
She's referencing the statement that I just made about there's a sector of the Pan-Africanist movement that's talking about creating a 6th region of the African Union to allow Africans here and some other places to become a part of the African Union. And why won't that work? And first of all, it might work. It might be possible to get a group of people identified as a part of the 6th Union, the 6th region of the African Union. The problem is the African Union itself is a neo-colonial setup. It's a setup that protects the status quo in Africa, just as the the Organization of African Unity was the same thing. It was something that was established in order to frustrate Nkrumah's ability to create a real unification of Africa into one single state. And so that's where the Organization of African Unity came from. It codified the different borders that have been created by white people, white power to control Africa. It was led by neo-colonial puppets, and today is no different. There's neo-colonial puppets that control, that have the whole setup, and none of whom are fighting against imperialism, none of whom are fighting against white power. It's just an arrangement of Negroes to protect their own interests in this club that's called the African Union.
She responded with they identified the U.S. as the 6th region.
Okay. Still, if whatever they identified is, it's still a neo-colonial setup. Uhuru. Anybody else?
Uhuru, can you hear me? This is Unique.
Uhuru, Unique.
Yes, Chairman.
Yes,
my
Carmen.
question is about the Solidarity organization.
Right.
And what exactly is their role? What is it that we have them do for us and for our ultimate goal of being free?
Well, what they are is the existence of the African People Socialist Party, or the African Revolution behind enemy lines. It gives us the ability to take the struggle for Black power directly into the African communities wherever they exist in the world. It gives us the ability to be able to frustrate the efforts of the imperialist white power to have a single, consolidated, united white population that's struggling against us. And it also gives us an opportunity to wage the struggle for reparations, not only against the white power colonial state and corporations, but for white people themselves, or African people reparations. So this is part of what they do. This is part of what their work is. And it also gives us the ability to be invisible in the white community. And right now, that means one thing, and anytime in the future, it could mean anything we want it to mean.
Right on.
Uhuru.
Chairman, this is Sean. I have a question.
Yes, comment, Sean.
Where
are you located, Sean?
Yeah, the African Socialist.
Where are you located? Where are you?
San Bruno.
Okay, San Bruno, yes.
San Francisco, California.
Right on. Okay. As you say, this city.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so the African Socialists, I'm at work, so I may have missed it, but would the African Socialist Party give us separation? What I mean, like, is take the police out of the Black community, where they're not allowed to police us or police the African communities no more, to kind of cut, to stop the constant death I see every week.
Yeah. The African People Socialist Party. If you will see our program, it calls for the immediate withdrawal of all police within the African community. That's one thing. But even in our popular movements, mass movements that we've created, we've initiated reinitiated the campaign for Black community to control the police, that we should control all the police in our community. That's another thing. These are mass movements. But these movements are simply part of campaigns to help win African people ourselves to an understanding that we have to be self-determining, that we have to have complete self-determination, self-government over our own lives, and white power has to be pushed out, absolutely, completely overturned, that we have to be a free and independent people with no other external force over our lives in any capacity at all. Other than that, it ain't free.
Okay.
It ain't free if you ain't got that.
Okay.
Uhuru. It means also that we have to do everything that's necessary to make that happen, because they ain't going to simply withdraw because we say withdraw. Uhuru. Anybody else?
Uhuru, this is Angelica. I
night with that is definitely no compromise.
Uhuru, Angelica, I'll never mistake you for somebody else again. Anybody?
Awesome.
Uhuru. Anybody else?
Yeah, Uhuru Sharon's life.
Uhuru coming live.
In Tampa.
Yes.
I really appreciate this discussion. I said over and over again how important it is that the African People Socialist Party has been around so long and has done this work in a fashion that has not only informed our struggle, but informs others of how to make the struggle. I want to know if this is the time and place that is appropriate for you to say something about how it is the African People Socialist Party has been able to survive when others have not. Other organizations and other forces have not been able to. Can you say can you offer, share some specific information about what party forces and the party itself had to do in order to make sure, without, like you said, going underground as others have done, what it was that the party did to be able to survive? Can you share that?
Yeah, I can say just a little about that. I thank you. This important question. In many ways, it's related to the question that Unique raised a moment ago as well. Because what the party did was, first of all, we really came to understand some things about what we refer to as dialectics. And that when the movement came under attack, and many people actually went underground, they just disappeared. In fact, it's interesting because at one juncture, we were out on the streets in Oakland, California, selling the burning spear. This might have been early 1980, 81. And forces who were associated with another organization at the time came up to us and said that you can't sell the paper out like this in public because, we got to be underground because the police and the state's going to get you and what have you. But we kept it alive. We stayed alive and we kept moving it forward because we knew that there's certain concessions you can't make, and that, Hewitt P. Newton was absolutely correct when he says that the revolutionary never voluntarily goes underground. As long as there is an inch of democratic space that we can have, we take that space and we don't simply go underground, and I think that we had developed what we call tactics and strategies for liberation, so that I think part of what made it possible for us to survive is the fact that we were relatively clear on in the particular eras that we were in work and what was possible to do and what needed to be done. If you will look, you will see the political report. You will read the political report. It gets long and winded because it does so much to try to sum up what is the situation at this moment. So that at this moment, when we saw the people suffering more defeat, political defeat, demoralization, you can't call on the people to go out and make a revolution. What you can call on the people to do is to get engaged and struggle against their slum laws, against the police killing that just happened down the street, against the merchants who overcharging us and stuff like that. And you can use these struggles that people are willing to make to help to bring them back fully into political life, and they become conscious of and can be made conscious of the revolutionary task that's before us. So I think that part of it has been having a firm grasp and understanding of the absolute need for there to be revolutionary transformation and not letting that go, and then also of having tactics and strategies to say how can you make this happen. We said a long time ago in the tactics and strategy document that the first thing that we had to do in order to be free is to win African people to the position of political independence. That if Africans don't believe we should be free, we ain't gonna be free. So if you know that we're confronted with a situation where the masses don't believe yet that we should be free, and you go out trying to do stuff that presupposes that people are ready, then you're going to die. It's not going to go anyplace, and the movement's going to be set back. So when you know that the people are not ready, then what you do is do all kinds of stuff that you can do to prepare the people to be ready. Another thing that I think is really important is that so I think that a real understanding of certain things like called dialectics really helped us to get through this. And I think hopefully at the plenary we can talk more, because there's some other stuff that I would like to talk about. People have raised that question, you know, in the past, and this doesn't, what I've just said doesn't exhaust that discussion, but there are other things that need to be said. One of them is the creation of the African People Solidarity Committee, which is not a little thing. And it has meant where the state has done everything to cut off resources, etc. We had an organization that worked in the white community to get those resources. When the state has done things like jail people and frighten them out of political life, we had a reserve force in the form of the solidarity movement that we can put where we needed it to be in order for us to do what had to be done to advance the revolutionary struggle. Those are some of the things that we did. And at the same time we were doing this, it was something that was being condemned by white leftists, white groups, and also by sectors of the black petty bourgeois, black militant organizations, black nationalists. And the final analysis, what it was all about was people were upset about our survival, but we survived and we thrived. Uhuru. Anybody else?
Yeah, Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, come back.
To further, in Houston, to further that question that Life just said, I think we have to say too that I was moving with them on instances when they had actually set us up to be killed, and we would not fall into the trap. Tactically, we had moved with them with excellent generalship, moving when they thought we were going to hold the fort at all costs. Other people arrested as opposed to the party's leadership. So yeah, I think that we have moved them tactically, down through the years and survived.
Mm-hmm. I think central to it all, though, in the final analysis, recognition that the people are the real makers of history, that we ain't nothing without the people. We're nothing. And I think that we've always tried to move in that fashion that represent that reality. Anybody else?
Uhuru, Chairman. This is Unique again.
Uhuru.
I don't know if you spoke on this earlier, and I'm sure we'll probably speak a lot on it at the plenary. But I would like to hear more of the vision of when it's all said and done and the smoke clears. What does life look like for us? What does free life look like? Like it's almost difficult to grasp and put your brain around. There not being police.
Yes.
Not being overpriced for things.
Yes.
Not competing with 50,000 people for a job.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just I'm really trying to see that I am a revolutionary, and my strong quality is visioning and really seeing the end state. So if you could paint that picture, what does free life look like for us? What do we? Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going to help to paint it, Sister Unique. You're going to help to paint it because you're absolutely true. Think about this. How in the hell can there be unemployment when you look at the actual physical condition of African communities throughout the world? When there's so much infrastructure that has to be done in Africa, when streets have to be, when electricity has to be brought, when mosquitoes and swamps, and things like that have to be cleared so that people, when schools need to be built there and here. And part of what traps us is this goddamn political economy born of slavery and colonialism that's called capitalism. And capitalism is competitive, and it creates these walls and things between people, and then it carved up Africa so we can't have a single African economy. It makes us impossible for us to attack all these issues as one people. What does it mean that you can make a song now, you're an artist, and you can go out and make music now that doesn't have to primarily appeal to the fact that the majority of the people who are going to buy your music are white people. and they want bitches and hoes and all this other kind of stuff. That's who you make music for. You're not making music for African people. It's because it is dictated by a political economy called capitalism, and is controlled by white people, and capitalism is white power, has been white power, born as white power. So part of what it means, think about that. Think about African culture emerging without being contaminated and placed within the strictures of the aspirations and requirements of imperialist white power. It means that we can become ourselves again. And part of what ourselves will represent, of course, is that we're going to have to attack a lot of bad habits that white power and white people created for us. But I'm just saying that you can help to create this vision, because this is what we need. We need visionaries who can show it. What it is to be free is to be what it was before white people, the advent of white people in history. It is to control our own brains, our own music, our own culture, and to speak to our own needs. It means building homes and houses the way when we need them. And it also means doing it in a fashion that's particular to the culture of African people, which means collectively, collective life. And we're going to have to create and form institutions and what have you that will allow, facilitate that occurrence. And I'm glad to hear you speak of yourself as a visionary who can help to paint the picture, because that's what has to happen. Because it's not good enough just for people to know things are bad. People need to also be able to see a vision of the future. We have to be able to paint a picture of people, what it means to be free. And unlike people from Palestine and other places in the world where there is a memory of being free, for the majority of African people, there is no memory of ever having been free. And so we have to create the vision of what it means to be free. And the only way we do that is by anticipating the removal of all of the things that have been imposed on us by capitalism, by white power, by borders, by colonialism, etc. Anticipate what it would mean to remove those things. What it would mean to have access to all of our Africa. It doesn't have to be a hungry or starving child any place. And once you do that, I mean, the competition for resources that result in people killing and fighting themselves for stuff, the destruction of political economy that competes one so-called country or one nation against the other. Those are the kinds of things so that our economic life is not determined now by the fact that somebody needs us to grow sugarcane here because that's what they need in their supermarkets, or somebody needs for us to take a worthless rock out of the ground in Sierra Leone that they call a diamond, and as a substitute for growing food and everything else that we need to survive. This is what our visionaries are going to help us to demonstrate to masses of people who need to be brought into political life as weapons against the kind of social system that dominates today, and as instruments through which we will exercise our capacity to live as a free and dignified people. Uhuru. I know that was a long-winded kind of response, Unique, but ultimately you're going to help us, and all the other Africans, are going to help us create this. There are some laws that I'm confident of that we are aware of, and then the other things is what do we do coming to grips with these laws? How do we create the future that we need to happen using the resources accessible to us, and part of the resources, the history and culture of our people as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman.
Yes, Comrade.
Chairman.
Uhuru.
Jordan, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, Jordan.
Yeah, so I think that's really important, what you just said, and it just kind of it's got me thinking a lot about certain personalities out in the conscious community who are certainly like gaining currency and popularity, who are talking about institution building, and so like there are certain folk who are talking about financial literacy and wealth building and building black businesses. People who are talking about board academies and boarding schools. You look at like what the Nation of Islam has done in Chicago with building certain institutions, mosques, businesses, and what have you. How does what the party is doing and talking about, how does that differ from what these other groups or personalities are doing out in the community or in certain parts of the country.
First thing, let me just say this: there's no organization that I'm aware of in this country at this day during this period that's done more in terms of creating institutions, economic and otherwise, for African people. We see them as examples for the population, what our possibilities are, and we see them as the germ of the independent political economy that we have to create for ourselves internationally. But the other and most critical thing is we see them as contending with the existing social system. Anybody who's just trying to build something, to go to school, to get a better education within the existing system is contributing to the continuing existence of the system. That we're not talking about boarding schools for the sake of having a damn boarding school. We're talking about creating institutions that are an actual contention. They represent a dual power, a power of the African people. We have to understand that the circumstances we are confronted with is not something that happened to us by some accident, accident of fate, bad fortune, that we've had this reality imposed on us. If there's not a school for us, then it's because somebody imposed the reality and took away our capacity for have our school. We're engaged in a revolutionary struggle. We have to overturn a social system that can only exist at our expense. Therefore, when we create these institutions, the institutions themselves are institutions that contend with the existing institutions of white power. And that's the fundamental difference. And because I know that there have been various organizations, there's some organizations raising $1 million to open up a school. And if they don't have training about how to overturn the damn system involved in the school, if they don't have something that helps the masses to go beyond this reality, just being black ain't enough, whatever the hell that means. Because Obama is black, and Mobutu was black, and Papa Doc Duvalier was black, and all kinds, and the person who's ripping off most people in the community right now, black. Blackness is not enough. So we have to have revolutionary consciousness, and we have to create revolutionary institutions that have as an objective to overturning the relationship of power that exists between African people and the system itself, and that ultimately has an aim in empowering the African working class to produce of all value, all wealth, and the class whose activity actually function as the means through which education, learning process itself developed. Uhuru. So I think we just about had it. I want to see if there's one other question, because we have to move forward, and there's some announcements I think we have to make as well. Anything else? Comments?
Any questions on Periscope?
Chairman, I just wanted to say that I unite with you on that last piece. It definitely, with Jordan, what he was saying about, this push for financial literacy and wealth building. I've looked at those programs, and I just say to myself, what's the point of me learning how to build wealth in a system that I'm trying to destroy?
Exactly. Thank you. Is that unique again?
Yes, this is me.
This is uniquely you, right?
Yes, uniquely me.
Okay. Uhuru, that's it, sister. That's right. Why? We trying to tear it down. All your dreams, you're trying to build.
Why put my money in the stock market when I don't want the stock market to exist?
Yeah. All the dreams that everybody affix themselves to the social system, we're trying to destroy them. So every dream that you got of success through your financial literacy, capitalist financial literacy, and that's what you're talking about, we're trying to destroy that. So we're working at odds. So, comrades, brothers and sisters, I think it was, a good study. I want to be able to talk more about the party, and I want to be able to talk more about the future, because I think that is critical. And visionaries like Unique and others of us, we want to be able to see this future, and the future is what we make of it. And I think that's fundamentally what is important for us to understand. That is going to be the future that we create. We will create this future. And when I say we, I'm talking about the advanced detachment. I'm talking about people who are in the front of this whole process of changing the world. I'm talking about the forces in the African People Socialist Party. We're preparing to govern. Right now, we have this discussion. I hope I will see all of you, certainly most of you, on the 9th of this month. It's been unseasonably warm everywhere, I guess, throughout the country, but it's going to be warm here as it gets cool in most of the places. So we look forward to seeing you here. And also, so I just wanted to make that announcement. And what other announcements do we have now?
Gazi is on the line.
Are you there, Gazi? Do you have announcements?
Uhuru, Chairman, I'm here.
Uhuru,
Chairman, I'm here.
Uhuru,
this is Gazi Kodzo. Chairman. This is Gazi Kodzo. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Membership for the African People Socialist Party, and I have a few announcements to make. The first announcement is Black Power Radio. Black Power Radio 96 is on its way, and we do need resources and awareness to be spread. So please go to blackpowerradio.org. When you go to blackpowerradio.org, you will be able to order your your boombox bank. And the boombox bank is a system that we've created to help Africans participate in the building of Black Power Radio 96.3. When you get your Black Power Radio boombox bank, you will be able to put a little change in the bank, change a day in the bank to raise up to hopefully like $96 to be raised to each boombox bank, and then you'll be able to send that back to our headquarters at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. Also, just to let you know, we do have a donating angel, an angel who is going to match everything that we raise. So when you donate your 96, this angel will match your 96 as well. So the change that you put in there in your boombox, your Black Power boombox, will be doubled by this donating angel to get Black Power Radio out there, to get the word of the African People Socialist Party out there, and to get the word of the African working class out there in a real way. Not just through the radio station, the local radio station, we're also going to have it online, and we will be having an app released as well, so you'll be able to listen to it on your phone. So this is something that you definitely want to spread within the African community and to help bring resources to. Next announcement is uhurunews.com. Please go to uhurunews.com where you can get the latest information and news that is going around for African people worldwide. Also at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have Africa Live, which will be hosted by Javon G. So please go to uhurunews.com where you can click on the Uhuru Radio and you can listen live to Africa Live. That will be at 11 a.m. Next announcement is the African People Socialist Party plenary is coming up the 9th, 10th, and 11th in St. Petersburg, Florida. So make sure to register. This will be next weekend. You go to apsplenary.org, apsplenary.org to register. Also, when you're there, you are able to order hoodies and T-shirts that will also bring resources to the African People Socialist Party. We also will be live streaming. If you are not able to make it, we will be live streaming at apsplenary.org. So make sure to bookmark that website, and you will be able to listen to and interact with us via live stream on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, which is the 9th, 10th, and the 11th of January. Next announcement we have is burningsparemarketplace.com. You can go to burningsparemarketplace.com where you can order your Burning Spear newspaper. You can also donate a newspaper to an African that is locked in the prison system, where they can get their political education, and we can turn these prison institutions into education institutions where we can bring those Africans into political life, bring them into revolutionary trajectory. You can also order the book that we were not reading from, but going from, The Uneasy Equilibrium. You can get your book from there at the burningsparemarketplace.com. You can also get One Africa, One Nation book at burningsparemarketplace.com. Last announcement is, of course, to bring membership and bring recruitment in. If you are interested in joining the African People Socialist Party, please go to joinapsp.org, joinapsp.org, or you can have one of your friends or family that you believe would be interested in joining the party, educate them on what the party is about, and bring them to join apsp.org, where they can sign up and join the African People Socialist Party and join the revolution. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Just a correction. I'm Javon G.
Wait a minute before you go there. Yeah, I wanted to say that Africans charge genocide, that people should go to africanschargegenocide.org. We charge in the United States with genocide against African people. It's a part of a political movement that's won support and winning support from different peoples around the world, particularly in Russia. And so we're asking everybody to go and sign that petition. We need 1 million signatures on that petition. I think we've only got about 5,000, a little more than 5,000. So please go to africanschargegenocide.org, sign the petition, and then share the petition and get it to other people to sign it as well. Put it out in your circles. And Javon was going to say something about, I guess, canceling the show.
Yeah, there will be no Africa Live this week as far as a live Africa Live. There wasn't any work done.
Is there an engineer?
Myself.
Well, I would like to do the show.
All right, so
yeah, and I don't ever want the show to be canceled without telling me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, next week there will be no Sunday study, no AM Sunday study, 8 o'clock on Sunday. So just want to let you know, due to the plenary. Yeah, we will have the plenary will be streaming live on uhurunews.com.
Uhuru. Thank you so much. All right, brothers, sisters, comrades, Uhuru.
Hello.
Uhuru.
I wish somebody had said something to me before making